In 2013, a message arrived at the San Francisco Police Department in the United States. The sender of the message claimed to be the mastermind behind the escape from Alcatraz prison and that he was ready to turn himself in and reveal everything on one condition: that he receive proper medical treatment after his illness worsened, as he was now over 80 years old. Strangely, the U.S. police issued a statement just 1 hour later, announcing their acceptance of the offer and that they were awaiting him. They stated that they would provide him with the best possible care. However, the prisoner never contacted them again, as if he was toying with them or perhaps had died. In any case, the prisoner never responded, leaving the Alcatraz escape as the smartest and most daring escape in human history. The place they escaped from was known as Hell. For those seeing me for the first time, I am the detective, and I talk about everything strange and mysterious on planet Earth. Today, I will tell you about the smartest escape plan in human history, a story with events and details that your mind can hardly imagine. Most importantly, it is documented, and all its details are 100% true. Because of this story, the prison was shut down and turned into a tourist attraction. Written at the entrance of the prison is, "The dreams of freedom have been shattered on the rock of Alcatraz forever." The island in front of you is not a tourist island or a place you'd wish to visit one day. This island is Alcatraz Prison, established in 1934. This prison is considered the most fortified in all of human history. The way it was built and the details within it were designed carefully, not only to prevent prisoners from escaping but also to discipline and psychologically break them. Of course, they did this because this prison was a correctional facility, and all the inmates there were prisoners transferred from other prisons across the United States. This means that when a person commits a crime anywhere in the United States, the state places them in prison according to the crime they committed. But when a person commits a crime or violates the rules while already in prison, they are sent to Alcatraz as punishment. And you can imagine what Alcatraz is like. First, the prison is located on a deserted island with an area of 22 hectares. The island is about 2.4 kilometers from San Francisco. The climate of the island is very cold, and there are ice blocks around it even in summer. In August specifically, the sea temperature can reach as low as 12 degrees Celsius. For the rest of the year, the sea temperature doesn't rise above zero. In addition, there are very strong currents, making swimming impossible. On top of all this, the U.S. authorities promoted the idea that they had bred hundreds of sharks and electric eels around the island so that if anyone thought they could endure the cold water and try to escape, they would know that sharks and eels were waiting for them. Of course, this information wasn't true, but the goal of the U.S. authorities was to increase the fear among the prisoners, making sure no one even thought about escaping from there. And sir, assuming one of the prisoners managed to escape, they wouldn't fear the cold water, the sharks, or the electric eels. The island is surrounded by water, and the toilets are exposed, God forbid, 24 hours a day. There are guards constantly patrolling between the cells. Of course, they patrol to monitor the prisoners' movements, even while they are inside their cells. Leaving the cell for any reason, whether for food or recreation, is prohibited. Meal times in the prison kitchen are half an hour exactly, and recreation time in the prison yard is only 6 minutes. Showers were once a week. The prisoners were responsible for cleaning, cooking, maintenance, and repairs within the prison. They worked in shifts, and each of them had a task in the prison. They were only let out of their cells when they had work to do, and as soon as they finished their work, they were returned to their cells and had to sit on their beds without doing anything else to avoid punishment. Alcatraz wasn't just a punishment for prisoners. Any prison guard or police officer with a bad reputation or behavior that violated the rules was sent to Alcatraz to serve there. That's why the worst guards and U.S. police officers served there. The relationship between the prisoners and the guards was very bad, to the point of torture. The behaviors they exhibited there were unnatural to the point that the prison became known as hell in everyone's eyes. This prison was a miniature model of hell, and there was a famous phrase written everywhere in the prison: "Your dreams of freedom will be shattered on the rock of Alcatraz." In other words, escaping from the prison was an impossible dream. Despite everything I've told you, there were 14 escape attempts from the prison, and all the prisoners who tried to escape were executed on the spot to set an example for the other prisoners. Of course, to be fair, the prisoners were very bad. Imagine someone committing a crime inside the prison and being sent there. They definitely wouldn't be normal people. That's why we can say that their harsh treatment was somewhat justified. After everything I've told you and after explaining the conditions of the prison, how did these prisoners manage to escape? Now, let's go step by step. The story is full of events and details you can't even imagine. The story began in 1961 with a prisoner named Alan West. Alan was a very ordinary prisoner, 31 years old, who was transferred to Alcatraz after getting into a fight with several inmates at the prison he was in before being transferred to Alcatraz, which was San Francisco Central Prison. Some sources say he was transferred to Alcatraz after a failed escape attempt from the prison he was in. In any case, the moment he entered the prison, the idea of escaping never left his mind. One day, Alan was assigned the task of cleaning the cell roofs. While walking on the roof, he noticed a refreshing breeze coming from the ceiling. He looked up and saw a large ventilation opening. The surprise was that the ventilation opening was wide enough for him to pass through. When he climbed inside, he saw the sky. It was essentially a duct leading from his location to the prison roof. Even the metal bars covering the opening were rusted and soft, meaning they could easily be removed. If he could remove them, he would be able to exit through the opening and escape the prison. However, it wasn't that simple. He obviously needed a team to plan with him and help him. This is where the second person in the plan comes in, Frank Morris, 33 years old. Frank was also transferred to Alcatraz after attempting to escape from the prison he was in. After he was caught, the prison warden told him, "I'll transfer you to Alcatraz, and I promise you'll forget the taste of freedom for the rest of your life." In any case, Frank and Alan were neighbors, separated by one wall. As soon as Alan returned from his cleaning task, he told Frank what he had seen and said, "This is our chance to escape." Of course, Alan was the one who came up with the idea and discovered the ventilation opening, but Frank was the mastermind behind everything. He planned every detail of the escape. Frank was smarter than 98% of humans. His IQ was 133, meaning he was a genius in every sense of the word. Indeed, the first thing Frank did was tell Alan, "We need to form a team and bring in people to help us escape." For 5 days, he thought about who would be suitable to help them, and in the end, he chose the Anglin brothers, John and Clarence Anglin. The reason for choosing them was that they were his neighbors, and their cell was next to his. Secondly, they were brothers and shared a cell. They needed to thoroughly survey the area and understand everything there. They needed to figure out how to reach the ventilation opening. Indeed, as soon as it was their turn to clean the roof, they combed the entire area. The surprise was that behind the cells, there was a long corridor about a meter wide, which was essentially a ventilation space between the cells. Sewage pipes ran through it. The corridor was abandoned, and no one passed through it. If they could reach it, it would be easy for them to get to the cell roof and, consequently, reach the ventilation opening and escape through it. The good news was that each cell had a small window in the wall, 30 centimeters wide and 20 centimeters high, located under the sink. This window connected the cell to the corridor I mentioned. Of course, the window was very small and covered with a perforated metal plate, making it nearly impossible for anyone to pass through. But Frank had a solution. Frank noticed that the prison walls were very old, over 15 years old, and hadn't been maintained. Due to the island's humid climate and high salinity, the walls were corroded, making it easy to dig into them. That's why he asked the team to steal spoons from the kitchen to use for digging. Indeed, Over the course of a month, each of them managed to steal 2 spoons, one for digging and one as a backup. They began widening the opening. The Anglin brothers used forks in addition to the spoons, which helped them expand the hole faster. Of course, during the digging process, they faced 2 problems. First, how to get rid of the cement, dust, and stones that came out with them, and second, how to cover the hole so that the digging wouldn't be noticed. Before I tell you how they solved these 2 problems, you need to know something. They dug every day at 9 p.m. Why? Because at this time, prisoners were allowed to sing and play musical instruments for a full hour. This period was an opportunity for all prisoners to escape the gloomy atmosphere they were living in. Even though each of them was in their cell, the sound of singing and music covered the sound of digging. Their plan was to start the digging process, with each prisoner in their cell. The digging they did was thrown out through the small windows into the corridor behind the cells. To give you a clearer picture, the digging process took over 6 months, so the amounts they removed each day were very small. Don't forget that they were digging with a spoon, and the surveillance on them was very strict. Their progress was very slow, with only a small advance each day. The second problem was covering the hole so that the digging wouldn't be noticed. This was the task of Frank, the genius, and John Anglin. These 2 worked in the prison's paint workshop. In the workshop, they made paint that matched the color of the cell walls. They used newspapers, cardboard, small stones, and cement to create a model that looked exactly like the original wall opening. They painted this model the same color as the wall. Every day after finishing their work, they covered the large hole with the cardboard model and hung it above the sink in a way that covered the entire hole. Since the guards didn't enter the cells, it was impossible for them to suspect anything. Indeed, for a full year, no one noticed that what was on the wall was a cardboard model, and no one suspected that behind this model was a hole large enough for a person to pass through. After about 6 months, the hole was ready. One day, they exited through the openings, and Alan, Frank, and John met in the corridor behind the cells. The 3 of them inspected the area and conducted a full study. It became clear to them that the task was very easy. Once they reached this area, it would be easy for them to get to the ventilation opening. After finishing their tour, they returned to their rooms to begin the second part of the plan. The problem they faced, which seemed unsolvable, was that if they escaped the prison and got outside, how would they reach the city? It was impossible for the reasons I mentioned at the beginning of the video, such as the cold water, strong currents, and ice, in addition to the famous rumor that the area around the prison was full of sharks and electric eels. Here, Frank told them with full confidence, "We'll build a boat and life jackets from the raw materials available to us." The idea was nice, or let's say it was obvious, and anyone in their place would have thought of the same idea. But how and why was he so confident? How did he have so much confidence that they could make life jackets and a boat? What no one knew was that Frank had read most of the magazines available in the prison. Of course, these magazines were brought to the prison. Don't think it was for the prisoners to read. No, they used them to wrap sandwiches or for other purposes, like covering the floor when they painted. Any magazine on the market had extra copies sent to Alcatraz. Sometimes, 2,000 or 5,000 copies would arrive. It didn't matter what was written inside the magazine, only how they would use it. Frank, in his first period at the prison, worked in the kitchen and also in the paint workshop. But Frank read these magazines. One day, he read an article in one of these magazines. The article talked about how to make a boat and a life jacket from materials available at home. From that moment, he memorized the idea because he was sure it would come in handy one day. The problem was that Frank didn't remember all the details of the article. That's why, on his first day working in the paint workshop, he started looking for the magazine to read the article again. As soon as he found it, he tore out the page and hid it with him in his cell. When Alan and the Anglin brothers found out that Frank had stolen the article and had the instructions for making the boat, they celebrated like never before. How were they going to make a boat for 4 people without anyone noticing? Here, Frank asked Alan and the Anglin brothers to pause the plan for a short while. He told them, "Let me find a suitable way." What distinguished these individuals and made their plan succeed was that they were very flexible in executing the plan and had patience. Most importantly, Frank's instructions were like orders to everyone. Everyone agreed that Frank was their lifeline and the only means for the plan's success. Since he told them they would pause the plan for a while, it was clearly for everyone's benefit. One day, Frank was sitting in his cell and noticed the prisoners cleaning the roof of the cells opposite his cell. He noticed that during the cleaning period, there was a lot of dust and dirt falling down. This annoyed the guards and prisoners. So he said, "This is it. Let's try an experiment. If it works, we'll continue our plan." That same day, Frank asked Alan to collect all the dirt and dust on the roof of the cells above Alan's cell where the ventilation opening they would escape from was located the next time he went to clean the roof. As soon as he got there, he would dump all the dirt down, and if anyone objected, whether prisoners or guards, he would suggest to the guard that they cover the area with a blanket. This way, the ventilation opening would be closed and hidden from the guards, meaning they now had a workshop to work in every day. But here, a new problem arose: how would they leave their cells and go up to work without anyone noticing? This time, the solution came from Frank and Clarence Anglin. Frank suggested that they make dummy heads that looked real. The dummy had natural hair and skin-colored paint. Since John and Frank worked in the paint workshop, they managed to steal paper, cardboard, and paint. Frank mixed the paint to match the skin color. They made the dummy using toilet paper, cardboard, and regular paper, mixing it with soap, toothpaste, and the cement that came out during the digging process. They were able to create dummies that perfectly matched the shape of a head and painted the face with the skin-colored paint they had. They only had one problem left: where would they get hair for these dummies? Here, Clarence Anglin came up with a solution because he was the prison barber. Clarence would steal a large amount of hair every day and bring it to his cell, sharing it with his brother Alan and Frank. The dummies now had hair, and they could use them as substitutes when they left their cells and went to the workshop every day. During the time when the prisoners started their singing party and began singing, they would place the dummy heads on their beds and exit through the ventilation opening to the roof of the cells. They divided the work into 2 parts: first, cutting the iron bars covering the ventilation opening, and second, making an inflatable boat and life jackets. The question was, what would they use to make the boat and life jackets? They would make them from the raincoats available in the prison. There were a large number of these raincoats in the prison because the prisoners and guards needed them for work outside the prison building. Since the area was cold and the weather unpredictable, they needed these raincoats. Of course, Frank had even calculated this. He said, "When will these raincoats be neglected and no one will use them? Definitely in the summer. That's why we'll make the lifeboat in the summer when the raincoats are in storage and no one is asking about them. It will be easy to steal them without anyone noticing they're missing or disappearing." Indeed, they managed to steal 22 raincoats. Over 2 months, as soon as the prisoners started singing, they would place the dummies on their beds to make it look like they were sleeping and go up to the roof to work in the covered area. They would make the boats from the raincoats and cut the iron bars covering the ventilation opening. After 2 months, they finished everything and were ready to escape from the prison. They chose June 11, 1962, as the day they would escape. The awaited day arrived, and at exactly 10 p.m., the guards turned off the prison lights, and all the prisoners went to sleep. Meanwhile, Frank, Alan, and the Anglin brothers placed the dummy heads in their beds and exited through the ventilation openings to the roof of the cells. But something unexpected happened: Alan couldn't get out of his cell. The reason was that the day before, Alan, as usual, covered the ventilation opening in his cell with the boat. Alan wasn't going up to the roof with them to keep an eye on the guards and monitor the area. During those 2 months, he had gained weight, making it difficult for him to pass through the ventilation opening into the corridor behind the cells. His three companions told him, "We'll continue, and as soon as you can widen the opening and get out, catch up with us." The others went up to the roof of the cells and entered through the ventilation opening. They continued until they reached the prison roof. There, they sneaked underneath and discovered that there were no snipers or guards, and all the stories were just rumors. They reached the prison's perimeter fence, which was made of metal mesh. They cut the fence and climbed over it. They reached the shore, inflated the boat and life jackets using a pump they had made. The pump was made from an accordion. They removed the sound part and turned it into a pump. They inflated the boat and life jackets, waited a bit in case Alan caught up with them. Alan was the one who came up with the idea and was the reason they reached the stage they were at today. But they lost hope and set off in the boat towards freedom. The next day, at 7:30 a.m., as usual, the guards started patrolling between the cells to check on the prisoners. When a guard reached the Anglin brothers' cell, he noticed that the two were still asleep. He poked one of them with his baton, and to his surprise, the head fell to the ground. The guard got scared and took a few steps back. They opened the cell door and went inside, only to find that the two were not there. The funny thing is that to this day, the dummies they used and all the tools they used to escape are on display in the prison museum, and tourists from all over the world go to see them. They went to Alan, who was sitting on the floor smoking, frustrated with everything. Alan was very cooperative and told them everything because he had lost all hope in life to the point that he asked the guards to end his life so he could rest. The irony was that Frank had calculated everything. When they asked Alan, where did the prisoners escape to, he told them, the only person who knows the destination is Frank, and when we asked him, he told us that this matter must remain a secret known only to him, so that if one of us was caught, he wouldn't reveal the others. Of course, search teams were sent out, but there was no trace of them. That's why the prison administration declared that the three prisoners had drowned and died at sea, and that their escape plan had succeeded, but they couldn't withstand the sea and died before reaching the shore. Of course, this wasn't true. The operation succeeded, and the police found life jackets on the shore on the other side. But this statement was meant to cover up the scandal that had occurred at the prison. The U.S. authorities remained tight-lipped about the details of the escape and how the prisoners managed to get out for 20 years, revealing nothing. A year after the story, in 1963, a film was produced that told the story of the gang and how they managed to escape. Strangely, most of the events in the film, although accurate, were obtained by the filmmakers through illegal means, and it's unknown how they got them from an official source. The U.S. authorities were strangely secretive about the story, yet the filmmakers had accurate and detailed information. That same year, the prison was shut down, and the phrase "your dreams of freedom will be shattered on the rock of Alcatraz" was replaced with "the dreams of freedom have been shattered on the rock of Alcatraz forever." After the escape story, the prison was closed and turned into a tourist attraction in 1975. The Anglin brothers sent a photo of themselves to the U.S. police to prove they were still alive. And as I mentioned, in 2013, Frank Morris, the genius, sent a message to the police saying he was ready to turn himself in, but he never contacted them again and disappeared once more. Unfortunately, in all this story, the only one who didn't benefit was Alan West. He was the one who discovered the escape method and helped plan and execute it, but he couldn't escape. Perhaps the only good thing is that if it weren't for Alan, no one would have known the details of the plan and how they carried out the smartest escape in human history. This was our story for today. I hope you liked it. Tell me your opinion. Was the illusion and lies spread by the U.S. police what initially prevented prisoners from escaping, or was Frank Morris truly a genius who managed to break their system and escape? I'm the detective. See you in the next video.